Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 354 for Monday, June 16th, 2025. This is a show all about Minecraft and is available on all of your favorite podcasting platforms, including a video version here on YouTube if you're watching this. If you're enjoying the show, please consider subscribing wherever you're consuming the podcast. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me as always is my Strawberry Fields friend, Johnny. Hello, sir.
Hello, yes, strawberry fields are currently taking shape in my garden right now. We are reaping the benefits. Anyone who follows me on Instagram knows what's up. But we've been talking about that in the render distance, along with Joel's experiences baking banana bread. If you're interested in getting a little bit of extra chat every week, the render distance is what we call the extended version of the podcast that you get if you're a patron. So head over to patreon.com/thespawnchunks, consider supporting, and while you're there, if you join up, you can also check out some of our latest quarterly and monthly hangouts where we go behind the scenes on the podcast to talk to our patrons about what they've been up to in Minecraft and also go over the figures of how the podcast is performing. Just recorded one of those, so excited to have that in the can and moving towards what is almost a podcast for every day of the year. Looking at episode number 354 and thinking, well, 365 is only a couple of months away, so pretty soon we'll have a podcast for you every day of the calendar year and still going strong every Monday. This week we're talking about some listener email. We got a chunk mail dispenser for you folks, so we got a few different varied topics that we can get into in lieu of a main discussion. But of course, the main news is that Chase the Skies is going to be arriving this week, so I'm sure that'll feature in the discussion somewhere.
Before we get into all of that, Johnny, what have you been up to in Minecraft this week?
This week, I am eyeballing the Minecraft Survival Guide Season 3 world again because of Chase the Skies coming out. This coming week, I'm going to be back in the world for the first time in a while because Craftmine has been taking up a lot of my attention. I think I'm done with Craftmine, even though I haven't done absolutely everything that the game mode demands, or at least like encourages you to do. So I went through a few more of the challenge mines. I was trying to kind of speed run my way through a handful of them just to see what I could get done in the time. And it threw me a couple of curveballs. There are a few more fun like boss modes, or like wave survival kind of things. There's one that involves just a ton of silverfish, and it says you better hope your aim is good because they're a small target. And it mixes in Vexes and baby zombies in the later waves, which is kind of fun. I found that a bit easier to do than the skeletons one, just because it put me in a normal world instead of a cave world with no mobs spawning. And so the problem in that one was almost managing food, while the silverfish one, it was just managing like the space around you. So I got that done. I did the spooky, scary skeletons one again, and it threw me the weirdest twist that I don't think is at all intentional, where it spawned the last wave of skeletons above the bedrock roof, because it's in a cave environment similar to the Nether, and it ended up with a roof of bedrock at Y128, and as I climbed up, it generated another wave of skeletons, what it thought was around me. What it turned out was above me. Fortunately, by this point, I'd unlocked some ender pearls that I could use to pearl onto the roof in a similar way to how you get to the nether roof if you're doing that in a survival world. And it turned out, obviously, full sunshine up there because you're in an overworld-style dimension that just has cave proportions. So Flat World was able to snipe all of the other skeletons, but because it's also a desert world, it was generating desert structures. And so I got up onto the nether roof, and there was a desert temple literally within render distance of where I was standing. There were a couple of villages, and so I did some villager trading to see if that did anything wacky. I think there were even like ruined nether portals and a pillager outpost up there that I didn't bother to investigate, but it was just the weirdest way of making the game-breaking update even more game-breaking, and I do not think it was intentional whatsoever, but very, very funny that it was.
I wonder how often stuff like that happens in these April Fool's snapshots, or even snapshots in general, where it's a bug. Like, obviously the game and the rendering and the generation is not performing as intended. And while, yes, it gives the developers a chance to say, okay, well, that's a bug we have to fix. But I'm wondering how much of that informs like ideas for new features. You know, like, does a desert temple spawning on what is essentially a nether roof or a bedrock roof then inform how maybe they do, like if we backtrack, like maybe how the pale oak forests were generated? Right? Like in terms of like their topography and stuff like that. Like, I wonder if any of those errors then get rolled back. Say, well, that was an extreme version of this and it broke the game. But if we control it and we aim it, like, does that end up being something that Mojang uses in the future? I'd be really curious to hear about that.
It would be really fun to see if, yeah, some of those experiments that have happened in the Craft Mine update come to light as future features. But either way, yeah, it was fun to mess around with that. And I think weird desert temple generation like that is not necessarily beyond survival Minecraft now. If you cast your mind back to some of our patron hangouts, I think it was Stora was digging out a perimeter and found a desert temple generated like at the same level that ancient cities would generate. So it was really, really strange to find stuff like that just floating in areas that you didn't expect it otherwise. Speaking of floating, though, the other thing I've done this week is actually built some stuff on Misadventures. As I mentioned before, I'm still doing occasional runs of the Lost Crypt to try and acquire that skeletal wolf mount, but after a few weeks of it now, I've decided to put that on the back burner and get building. So you saw pictures of the Sky Islands that I'm trying out built in Creative last week. This time I actually got them done in Survival on the Misadventures overworld. So the screenshot I'll give you is one with the Sky Pirate Roost that I built on the cliff top in the foreground, but in the background you can see sort of the scale of the floating city, or, well, it's going to be a floating city eventually. For now, it's a storage building, a bridge, and half a house, but you get the idea. And hopefully it's going to continue into some interesting directions, and hopefully some stuff that I can make actual dungeons out of, provided that the admin team works with me on the idea that I have in mind. So yeah, here's hoping that works out well. In the meantime, I'm really happy to have it built. It hasn't changed much since the version that I shared in the screenshots last week, but yeah, hopefully this is the beginning of something that's going to be a much larger project and is going to evolve over the weeks to come.
Yeah, I like the observatory sort of look to it.
Yes.
It's cool. I like the use of the copper to kind of indicate like the end of...
I stole that from the spyglass texture. I think the spyglass has that kind of copper ring on it, and obviously is made of copper to begin with. So I thought, what if they just took a spyglass and scaled it up? And then, yeah, it's not looking in the direction that the sort of Sky Village is for now, but I might end up repositioning some stuff later so it looks like they've got a lookout that's aiming towards that, or maybe a cannon. I said it in the past about this spyglass, like it could be a weapon of some kind, or it could just be a big telescope, and it's kind of up to the eye of the beholder, really.
Yeah, no, the RTS player in me went like, that looks like a turret.
Yeah, exactly, right.
What blocks are you using in the walls of the outpost?
It's all jungle wood, so stripped jungle wood. And
okay.
The same is true of the of the Sky Islands as well, because I really wanted it to be a palette that was warmer than just grey stone, and so with red sandstone as kind of the key resource that I wanted to make use of because of the regenerating resource world and being able to get hold of an infinite supply of it for once, I decided, sure, let's go with a warmer color palette. Let's use something neutral-ish like strip jungle wood as a wall texture, and let's see how I can texture that. So in terms of detail and shading, I've got things like mushroom blocks and packed mud and a bit of grey terracotta in there, and it all sort of contributes to this slightly musty feeling to it while still keeping it in the warm palette, because Mythical Sausage is over there doing incredible things with stone brick, and I sort of don't want to cramp his style, and I want to stand out a little bit from that. So yeah, that's what I've got going on as far as the palette for this area.
Nice. Yeah, I guess it's just because it's in shadow. Like I see it now that I'm zoomed in and looking at it. It's like, oh yeah, that's strip jungle. But in the smaller thumbnail in our live chat, it's like, what is that? Because I think what was confusing me was that it's next to some mangrove logs that have the bark still on them, and they almost look like they were the same color because of the shaders. Like it's really cool. I'm gonna get into this in what I've been up to, which is the idea of light and shadow influencing the blocks that we're choosing, and I mean that's coming, with vibrant visuals. And actually, I haven't been doing a lot of, in terms of building, I haven't been doing a lot of structures. I've been doing mostly landscaping, and so for me this week, it's been filling in these patches along the east bank of the Spruce River. This is the last river that I've got to kind of polish up in West Hill, and it's one of those things where like I've not think I've bitten off more than I can chew, but because I've added so much detail to things like farms and certain areas where they might have a dock, when you've left the natural Minecraft generation completely untouched by the player, it looks really odd by comparison. So it's not like I have a lot of work to do on the west bank, but I definitely want to go in with bone meal and like cover up the dirt sides of the blocks if I can, add some more lush vegetation, make it look a little bit more like not a soul has been over there because it's all just kind of like long grasses and riverside. And now that we've got firefly bushes, that might come up as well. But on the east side, I only had a couple of patches. There's still a couple more up near the north end that I have to take care of, but they're very simple, like just under the bridge, around the bend, that kind of thing. But these were a lot more visual because they were next to farms. So there was this weird little jut of land that went out behind the acacia farm, and I turned it into a little orchard. And so I used some flowering azalea. I used some mangrove leaves as well. And the combination really, really worked out well because it is one of those areas where it transitions from sunflower plains to river biome. And if you're using acacia, they don't shift color with the biome tint. So by using some blocks that do, it allowed things to be a little bit more progressive and not look like a stark line was being drawn. And then they're all custom trees. Like they're not super big. They're like maybe 5 blocks tall. And I tried to make them different shapes, but ultimately at that scale, making them different shapes, they just look like completely different types of trees. And so I just kind of made them the same. But then I changed the combination of blocks. So some trees have got more or less flowering azalea in it. And so that helped me differentiate between them. And then I was putting in things like stairs near the roots, or my favorite, which is a fence gate underneath the canopy to kind of have like just a little bit of indication of some sort of branches going on. I also like using mangrove roots as the last block of the trunk before you transition into leaf blocks. And it's subtle, but it does help the top of the tree feel a little bit lighter as opposed to having this log that kind of sits just 1 block below the canopy. And so that's how I put that all together. And then there's a path that goes down to the river and a little place where people might gather water, adding things like a composter. And what I like so much about doing things like this is that this is behind the acacia potato farm, but it also is near like the back barn path and the path that goes around the back of the wall. And so I was able to actually tear down part of the wall and connect this so that it looks like while it's outside of the wall for the acacia farm, it still looks like it's part of that property. Like it still looks like this is the kind of thing that the acacia farmers would look after and tend to, which is nice. And we actually have some unintended behavior in that the bees that are next to the small vegetable garden in the back of the acacia farm, one of them has decided that it's now an azalea bee, and it flies over the barn to the azaleas. And then on the way back, it always gets stuck under the eaves of the barn, and then it has to like back up and fly around. And so over the course of the stream, we would see this bee repeatedly find the acacia, get lost going home, find its way home, rinse and repeat. And it was just amusing to no end for me. Because again, I didn't put a bee there on purpose. Like you don't realize how wide the range is on a bee for it to pollinate in the game. So it was really kind of cool to see some emergent gameplay going on there.
Yeah, I was going to call out the screenshot with the bee because it just feels so picturesque. It's like, you've got nature taking back over in this area where you've done a little bit of like, terraforming work, but obviously naturalizing it. And I think, yeah, the bee being there, even the fact that there's a composter in shot, so it sort of looks like a bee hive, but obviously not functionally in game one. And I think that's such a fun shot. There's definitely something to be said for making something, if this is supposed to be an orchard, especially making something that feels like player scale to the extent that like a farmer could reach up and like pluck some of the lower fruit off the trees, but still getting the variety in at that scale is difficult. And so the fact that, yeah, you've got like little touches of detail, whether it's like, buttons or fence gates or stairs or whatever you can do to make the trees slightly individual is going to go a long way when you're only working with like a 3x3 canopy of leaves, if that, So I think this is really successful for what you've tried to do with it. Like the whole peninsula of trees there is very, very cute.
Thanks, man. It was a lot of fun to do, and it was really nice to use some pink petals and leaf litter as well to kind of help with details of around the roots or getting the edge to the path and making sure it felt like it had some borders to it. And because of the combination of like, it's a magenta flower on the azalea leaf for the flowering azalea, and the pink petals, it almost looks like petals that have fallen off the tree. I mean, they still look like
Yeah.
flowers if you look directly at the pink petals, but it does sort of add the idea of like maybe some of these were blossoms that have fallen off, and allowed me to give an edge to the path. And something I really enjoy about things like leaf litter, now wildflowers, which I haven't actually used yet, the pink petals and moss carpet, they all just have that little bit of geometry. Like it's just that 1 to 2 pixels that when you place it along the edge of a path, it really helps give an edge to something. And so I've found myself doing that more. Like I'm adding more color and I'm adding more variety to things along paths, because it does really help kind of focus the player in on like, this is where you're supposed to walk. Because even though it doesn't matter in Minecraft, I don't want to, like visually as a human, like I don't want to walk in the flowers. You know, it's in the same way that I wouldn't want to walk across someone's flower garden as I'm out for a walk around the neighborhood, right? So I thought that was an interesting way to kind of delineate the path. The other things that I've been doing have just been smaller patches. Y'all will remember the abandoned farmstead I did a while ago. I did all the farmland, but I left the bank empty because I knew I was going to have to wait until the 1.21.5 was available for us with the bushes and other greenery. And so I did that. And I decided to give sugarcane a go because I haven't used it. I really don't like using string on top of stuff. But I have a string texture that is really translucent. So like it's only like 10% or something. So it's really, really hard to see. And both with shaders, which often catch things like string or bushes or these weird little pixels and like highlight them. Like sometimes cobwebs will look like they're a light with shaders, but this particular shader pack doesn't. I checked it with and without shaders. You can barely see it. And because it's not something that you're in front of all the time, it's not a bush or a sugarcane thing in front of a door to a building. Like this is on the edge. It's really kind of far. You're not going to be up looking at it in the same way that I am when I'm building it. And so it worked out pretty well. And I do have a custom sugarcane texture for people that might be looking at this going like, this is not the same as my sugarcane. So it is a custom sugarcane texture. I do have, it's both a 3D model and it's a different color. I actually brought in a sugarcane image from the web and kind of tried to make it as close as I could to natural looking sugarcane. And I like it a lot better. And so I did that. And then I brought that kind of mentality of just like taking these edges of the river and just kind of like roughing them up a bit, adding a little bit of stuff in there, challenging when I want to use moss and moss carpet, because of course sometimes we're in the river biome and those bushes really don't work well with the grass color. They kind of clash. So I've used azalea leaves and in some cases some oak leaves and mangrove leaves on the bushes just to kind of like get them to be an element in the game that will transition with the biome tint. And I think my biome transition is only like 4 blocks or something like that. It's not long, so it doesn't take much. And then there was a cliff behind the abandoned farmhouse that needed texturing and a little bit of additions to it. And then there was the embankment behind the what will be a bee farm that's currently just like placeholders and scaffolding and stuff like that, and some path blocks. And I really like the way that this came out. I did a retaining wall, and I had part of the retaining wall crumble, like fail. And so some of the grass has turned to like dirt and crumbled over. And again, really cool use of leaf litter. Like it looks like bits of dirt or a broken part of the grass where it's not a solid grass block. It's more like a grass block that has dirt patches on it. And at a distance, it does sort of look like the wall has failed. And I really thought that this came together nicely. And it's a combination of tough, mossy cobble. I think I've used tough bricks and all slabs of all of the above and stairs. And then every once in a while, a pressure plate, just a stone pressure plate to kind of like give that, again, any kind of like pixel geometry difference that you can do really helps make things look like they've kind of crumbled down gradually. And that was it. Like that was the whole week. I mean, it's not really difficult stuff to do, but it is a lot of trial and error, a lot of like place this, back up, look at it, make some too tall ferns and grass, see if you like it, remove it if you don't. But I really enjoy the bush block and the variety that you can get now with the bush block and the grass and the different things. Like it really feels like more of a ecosystem on a riverbank as opposed to just like a grass grid, which I really, really like.
Again, that's the thing I was going to highlight from this, is that you've managed to make it feel so bushy. And it feels like very natural for what I would see like if you're walking along a canal in the British countryside and like the side that isn't like the towpath is probably completely wild like that and will have just overgrowth of stuff that's just been allowed to sit there if it hasn't been like maintained regularly and trimmed back. And yeah, it's just like that. You don't tend to see as much like, earthy banks around the outside and grass growing over the top. You just get like a variety of plant life that just loves by the water. And so even though in Minecraft we have very few options when it comes to that, just throwing the bush in there means it's not all ferns and grass. And I think it's created such a nice variety that with a couple of leaf blocks here and there, you can get something that feels natural and looks very composed, but also feels very wild and it's part of nature. So yeah, you've done a fantastic job of that. That and the wall together, I think it makes the whole thing just look so picturesque.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. And I feel like the reflection in the water helps too. Like it almost makes it feel more lush because you can see like all of the greenery reflected again in the water directly below it. And so it kind of adds to that whole vibe. The kind of things that like you kind of take for granted when you're playing Minecraft without shaders on, and like the water doesn't reflect anything, and things are kind of matte in their rendering. And it makes me really curious about vibrant visuals, which I think we can probably get into the news because I think that's going to be a bit of a discussion, even though there's not a lot of news to report. Vibrant visuals are coming. So jumping into the news. Minecraft Java Edition has a release candidate 1 that was put out last week. As we get ready for Chase the Skies, here comes the first test flight of 1.21.6. There are 3 fixed bugs in this release candidate. Not signed books and quills with an overflowing new line at the bottom do not depict the page's contents. Happy Gasts gets you stuck in blocks while riding and gets stuck in blocks upon dismount. And the locator bar shows inaccurate positions after a respawn. There's also been a release date for Vibrant Visuals and Chase the Skies. That is tomorrow, June 17th, 2025. That's a Tuesday. And Vibrant Visuals transforms the overworld into pixel-perfect vacation spots. Experience impressive graphic improvements as water reflects, fog drifts, and waterfalls glimmer. Chase the Skies and its features will be available for both Minecraft Java Edition and Minecraft Bedrock Edition on June 17th. Vibrant Visuals will be available for compatible Bedrock Edition devices only on June 17th. There is a link to the next game drop has a name, which is an older Minecraft article in the description. This is a YouTube video on the Minecraft YouTube channel that was released earlier this week.
Yes, we also have a quick YouTube video about Minecraft's visual refresh. Vibrant Visuals, Minecraft's biggest official visual refresh, is coming initially to Minecraft Bedrock Edition, and you can join the Mojang developers as they discuss the vision behind this visual overhaul, the road to getting it ready for Bedrock Edition, and what comes next. So we'll have a link to that YouTube video. You can find it at youtube.com/Minecraft. The link to Vibrant Visuals is also in there. There's a Minecraft.net article from March 22nd outlining a bit more about Vibrant Visuals, and also a link to Vibrant Visuals on Java Edition, which was an article published about a month later on April 16th. Once again, we should note Minecraft has said Vibrant Visuals requires Bedrock Edition and a supported device, so it won't be available across every single Bedrock Edition device. You might not see them coming to the Switch, but you might see them coming to the Switch too. Check out the article for all of the details on that. It is also coming in the future for Minecraft Java Edition, and at launch, some marketplace content may not be compatible with Vibrant Visuals either, so it's worth checking. There'll probably be like a little icon somewhere that lets you know, or you'll just need to try toggling it a couple of times to find out.
And there's been a little bit of discussion in our Discord and various channels about whether or not Vibrant Visuals was going to be in parity with Java and Bedrock. And because you and I do this weekly, I think we've been in the know for quite some time. But if people are missing episodes, or if they're coming to the news late, or in some cases, the information is in the description of the YouTube video, but it's not at all stated in the voiceover or in the actual video itself, so you have to read the description. And I'm not sure, depending on people on mobile, like I don't read YouTube descriptions on mobile, and I don't read them when I'm on my TV. I will if I'm on the computer, like if I'm watching at the desktop, I absolutely read the description. But depending on the platform, it's not always the easiest thing to grab and see, and so some people are maybe missing it. So I thought it was worth pointing out that Java Edition is going to be getting Vibrant Visuals later than Bedrock, and we don't have a timeline for Java Edition Vibrant Visuals. And that's something that Jens pointed out at Minecraft Live. Like that was part of his pitch at Minecraft Live. So the information has been out there for quite some time, but worth restating. And I'm really curious about Vibrant Visuals because in the process of updating that cliff that I was talking about earlier, I added a couple of stair blocks, maybe a slab, just to kind of give some overhang and some shadows, because I'm dealing with a shader pack. I'm using Complementary Reimagined, which people can find on Modrint. I'll have a link in the show notes. And you can turn on pixelated shadows, which is going to kind of mimic what Vibrant Visuals is going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really surprised by the fact that I was pushed to place some blocks to create some cast shadows on that cliff, where normally in vanilla Minecraft, I wouldn't be. And it does make me really curious to see how Vibrant Visuals is going to influence block placement, build orientation, like facing the sun versus not, that kind of stuff. And so I am really curious how Vibrant Visuals is going to affect things. So for me, I think I'm going to take the leap and stream some gameplay from Bedrock Edition and play Chase the Skies, see how I feel about Vibrant Visuals. I really haven't spent much time in it. I haven't been overly impressed, but I've also only ever been in a Bedrock preview, and I've been flying around taking screenshots. And that's like, not, I don't want to say I'm rushing, but like it's my production afternoon for the show where you've got the edit done. I'm trying to do the notes, and I'm trying to get you some YouTube thumbnails so you can continue on with the work that you need to do. And so I'm kind of trying to get the snapshot screenshot as fast as I can. And I'm not really paying attention to a lot of stuff. I'm not dilling around with settings and things. So I'm really curious to get into a survival situation, a 3-hour gameplay session, typical stream where I'm playing and I'm seeing what settings I can get into in Vibrant Visuals and Bedrock and play around with it to see how I feel about it. Because right now my early impressions have been, it looks cool. Some of the reflections are really nice. The water looks great, but I do find the overworld in general feels overexposed. Like everything kind of feels like it's got this white haze on it. And I'm curious as to whether that's like, is that a monitor setting? Is it a brightness setting? Like, what are the ways that I can dial this in and then come back to the show and say, okay, if you're new to Vibrant Visuals, like here's some of the things that I found gave me the best results. And also, I've just never played Bedrock, and we've got people asking us about Bedrock all the time in email and sometimes in our Discord. So it'll be nice to kind of have that experience. I'm just like, yeah, okay, so I've spent some time in it. I did play on Xbox for like a couple of hours, but that was more focused on what Minecraft is like with a controller rather than really focusing on Bedrock mechanics. I really didn't do much. Like I went mining and I built a hole in the wall, and that was kind of it. I was just kind of messing around. And because I found the controller so slow, I didn't return to it on Xbox. And so I'm much more of a keyboard and mouse guy. And so I'm sure that because I'm be playing Bedrock on Windows, on my gaming PC, then I'll probably have a much better experience in general.
Yeah, I would agree. It's weird going back and forth now. Like, it's been a while since I played Minecraft on a console, but when I'd been playing Minecraft for maybe 5 or 6 years, I went back to it, having only played keyboard and mouse for a while, but having started on Xbox, so I still had like a little bit of muscle memory, but it was a night and day difference. It's really quite strange going back to console and having like a limited turn speed because you're controlling the camera with a thumbstick and that kind of thing. So I imagine you'll find it a little more palatable on PC. A couple of things I will recommend. One thing, a recommendation right away, and another one just about thinking about the long term. The first recommendation I will have is turn off animated menus because they have this kind of transition where the menu like fades in, kind of like pops up from the bottom of the screen as though your hotbar is expanding into an inventory. And as somebody who plays Java, that's one of the things that bugs me most about Bedrock is that my inventory doesn't appear instantly when I hit the inventory key. And so that's one of the things that I didn't realize until some friends like mentioned it to me, that you can turn that off, along with some of the other little visual things that Bedrock does, like having the paper doll that shows whether or not you're crouching in the corner, which is really useful on Xbox when the crouch is a thumbstick toggle rather than a hold shift to crouch kind of button, right?
Right.
But like it's in there with some of the visual options to turn off animated menus. And after that, Bedrock felt like it was less clunky. I felt like I still have a little bit of input delay for whatever reason on Bedrock Edition that doesn't feel like quite as responsive as Java, but that smoothed over that process a little bit. My second recommendation, the long-term one, is that as you're exploring this stuff, remember that the community is going to get hold of the resource packs and the sort of behind the scenes, under the hood stuff for Vibrant Visuals, and might have some agency over how certain textures look, how certain things adapt to the light, whether something's reflective versus emissive, and all of that kind of stuff. And similarly to Minecraft RTX, I found the experience way better once a community member had made the RTX pack that I ended up using. I'm pretty sure it was Kelly's RTX that I ended up using long term, and that was way better in my view than the out-of-the-box RTX experience, just the default texture pack. So I think maybe Vibrant Visuals will end up being similar, and that you'll find something that you like better, maybe with slightly duller, like grass reflectivity or whatever, the kind of stuff that people say makes some of these blocks look like they're plastic and cartoonish. If you're into that experience, then great, but I think it's also worth remembering that the community maybe has a bit more control over at least the way blocks interact with the lighting than it might initially appear, because Vibrant Visuals will still be very new.
And that brings up a point that I was thinking of when I watched that Minecraft visual refresh YouTube video, which would encourage everybody to go watch. It's a really good little 5 to 6 minute behind the scenes. And they were talking about I can't remember what they called it, but it's a different map. It's something that shows the reflectivity of a texture. Like, it's a new thing that all the blocks in Minecraft have. And the example that they gave was tough bricks, and they made them more shiny. And my first kind of gut reaction was like, I don't use tough as a shiny block.
Yeah.
Like, in any instance I've used it, I mean, this week especially in that retaining wall, it's an old brick that's kind of green. And that's why I've used it in that way. And if that old brick that's kind of green was shiny in my retaining wall, it would really not make any sense and would bother me. And so I think it's good that you brought up the fact that just like people don't like some textures in vanilla Minecraft, like I've got a custom wheat texture, beet texture, all kinds of stuff. Not a lot, but I've got a few things. And a lot of it just stems from like me going, ooh, the wheat looks like snot. I don't want that in fields in my town. And I think people will have the same sort of reaction to like, I don't want this block to be shiny. I do want this block to be shiny and it's not, or, different things for their builds. There might even be something very specific for a server. Like if you've got like a cyberpunk or a sci-fi server, you might want a lot more to be reflective than currently is, right? And I think that's important that new texture packs will have that ability to change that map. I can't remember again the technical term that they used in the video, but it's like a map of how things are reflected. It's like a density thing. So if it's super dense, then I believe it increases the reflectivity, and if it's not, then it just only certain parts of it. And because of that, you can actually have some parts of the texture be reflective and some things not. A good example would be on bricks. You could have the mortar not be reflective, and you could have the brick section be reflective. So depending on your interests and what you're doing with the texture in the shader pack, then, or not shader pack, but the resource pack, you could have a lot of control.
Yeah, I'm imagining like the creaking heart, for example, having the shiny like zigzag part in the center where the sap kind of shows through compared to how matte the tree bark could look, and you can get some really cool effects with that. So that's exciting. I'm also really happy to hear that you're using that as an opportunity to check out Chase the Skies, because I think you mentioned in the past that you're not that interested in updating the Citadel right away. It's just a kind of, I'll get around to it when the mods and the data packs are ready kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is that the way that Minecraft has been restructured over the last little while, as far as data pack and mod builders are concerned, the updates tend to come a lot faster. I do have a number of mods on the server. Most of them are quality of life / UI stuff. But it does create a bit of labor for me as the server admin to like update the server, back it up, like grab all the different mods. It's a list of about 20 or more. Make sure they're all updated, catalog all that for other server members so they can go find them on their own and download them, because a lot of them are client side. We only have like 6 or 8 on the server itself, and then the rest of mine are all client side. But some of my server mates like to have the same mods that I do. And as a result, I'm probably not going to jump right on Chase the Skies as it comes out. 1, because the mods won't be ready, and 2, like I just did this a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And outside of the vibrant visuals, which are not in Java right away, I don't really have a big push for the Happy Gast. I'm not going to be using them in West Hill in the medieval fantasy area. And while I think they're cool, I've done all the high building I'm going to do. Like I really
Yeah,
don't have anything that I need to be on top of a Gast for. Like all the bridges are done, all the towers are done. Nothing I need to be up high in the sky for. And so I'll probably wait on that. That said, I've mentioned a number of times I've got a sci-fi zone idea that I'm coming up with, and I will absolutely be trying to use the Happy Gasts in one form or another, whether it's just to have them around, whether it's to use them to build things in the sky. I've got opportunity to have stuff floating in a sci-fi zone. So like there's all kinds of use cases that I can think of for the Happy Gas. So I will definitely be upgrading for that. And also, again, vibrant visuals with emissive textures and things like that could be very cool in the sci-fi zone. And as you mentioned, waiting a little bit might give some user-generated resource packs a bit of time to come out as well.
for sure. In the sort of flip side of that, I'm going to be upgrading the Minecraft Survival Guide world right away. Because for a start, the landscape of some of the areas that I've chosen to build will definitely benefit from Happy Ghasts being around. I've got a lot of tall, like Cherry Grove mountains and stuff like that. Even in the Windy City area, I started a project there a little while ago. That's got some pretty tall cliffs, and there are some areas that it's easy enough to get around with Elytra, but if I want to modify the cliffside, it becomes one of those things where it's kind of difficult to see what I'm doing up close and then get back up to where I was building previously. And, you can do stuff like that with scaffolding, but for convenience's sake, you leave the scaffolding there and then you can't see what's behind the scaffolding. So, yeah, I think honestly having Happy Ghasts as an alternative to that, plus the fact that they would blend in really well with floating islands and some of the architecture I have in mind for the Windy City being wind charge related, so you can jump up to higher floors and that kind of thing. I think it'll be perfect to have around. So it's going to really get me in gear to work on that project some more. I think it's going to be really strange getting used to seeing a Ghast in the overworld and not panicking that something has gone horribly wrong. So we'll see how that works out, especially as I maybe breed up a couple more or I guess craft up a couple more, because while I think I aim to find an unexplored Soul Sand Valley for the series, just to kind of prep people for where they can expect to find them, it's also worth remembering you can craft them if you can't find them, and I do have a lot of resources available to me to do that. I'm pretty sure I've been keeping all of the Ghast tiers because I don't use regen potions and I haven't crafted that many end crystals, so I have a decent amount of Ghast tiers just from traversing the nether naturally. And bone blocks I have in plentiful supply, although I think it's a soul sand block now, not a bone block. I forget exactly how the crafting recipe changed, but something to look into for the series. It also incentivizes me to look into Ghast farm designs if I don't have enough Ghast tiers, and they have changed recently because I think of a nerf to portals, like Ghasts can't spawn overlapping with a portal anymore, so those old Nembon design farms are going to work slightly differently. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting period of exploration, both from a technical perspective, but also from a building perspective. And now that I'm basically done with Craft Mine, it's going to be nice to hop into Survival Guide again right as a fresh update hits.
I completely forgot about the crafting of the Happy Ghast and the idea that you can have another technical project like building a farm, because I've been looking for some in-between projects. Like I don't think I want to jump right from West Hill to a sci-fi zone that's roughly the same size. Like I kind of want to get some smaller projects, bop around the server, work on some infrastructure, do some things that are going to make my life easier for the next project, as well as other people on the server. And so a Ghast farm would be a good one, because we don't have that, because we've not had any real use for Ghast tiers for us on the server the last few years.
Yeah, I'm looking at the wiki now. It is a soul sand block as of the full release update. The crafting recipe will be a soul sand block surrounded by Ghast tiers, and I'm pretty sure piglins barter soul sand, right? So in theory, if you put a piglin bartering setup with a couple of like item filters next to a Ghast farm, you could also auto craft dried Ghasts if you wanted to. Just like a significant setup on the roof of the nether, you'd manage to get it done. So I do think you could set up a Ghast factory for yourself, given a small amount of engineering and knowledge of how those farms work. So yeah, I do think there's going to be some people will have fun with that. But then obviously, yeah, taking a dried Ghast back to the overworld or to the end even, and growing them there and using them for transport, or moving inventory around with chest boats, I think it's going to be fantastic. I'm really looking forward to seeing what people end up doing with them, because I have my ideas, but the community always comes up with some fantastic stuff.
Speaking of community, when you do get your hands on a Happy Gast or Vibrant Visuals, let us know what you think. You can send us an email at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. That's where all of our listener email comes in. Keep the emails short and sweet. It increases the chance of getting them on the show. And hey, pro tip, we're running a little bit low. So if you've got some ideas, there's a really good chance, especially if it's topical, that you're going to get at least slotted into the show. Maybe we expand your email into a main discussion some week, but there's lots of new stuff to talk about in Minecraft. So again, send that email into spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. This is our chunk mail dispenser, so we're going to have more email than usual this week, and Johnny has got the first one.
Yes, this one comes in from JJ with the subject of inventory ideas. Hi, Johnny and Joel. I was listening to episode 353 and was thinking about ideas for inventory changes to Minecraft. I've recently been obsessed with Stardew Valley, and I think there are actually a few good ideas there. I definitely think Mojang should add an organizer button. I cannot live without it in Stardew, and I have a few ideas for making the inventory bigger over time. The first was having an upgrade sold by a wandering trader, and have it be rare, or maybe an inventory slot upgrade after you defeat a boss like the Wither, the Warden, or the Ender Dragon, etc. I can't wait to hear what you think. JJ didn't die, she just got stuck in Stardew Valley.
I like that some of these death messages are not death messages. Like they get a little bit creative. Like it's I failed in Minecraft, but it's because of this other game that I really like, and I can see that. Maybe not with Stardew Valley for me. Satisfactory would be how I would quote unquote die in Minecraft, because that's the game that pulls me out of it from time to time. I actually just mentioned this the other day on stream. I am all for an organized inventory button. The inventory pain that I feel when I'm having all of those different foliage blocks and things in my inventory to do all that riverside scaping that I did this week is infuriating. Like you're just constantly swapping blocks down to the hotbar. You're full. You're always dumping things out because you're picking up grass blocks. You're replacing them with moss. Like you're doing all this stuff. And I do find it really tricky. And I would love an organized button that would probably have to exclude the hotbar. We've talked about that on the show before. Like people like their hotbar the way that they like it. And if you hit an organized button that moved things into the hotbar, it would just create more work for the player. But just those 3 lines of inventory space, if they were to get reorganized alphabetically or in a way even condensed, like I know it's my responsibility, but I very often will have 2 inventory slots full of grass. And as I've been working, I've just been quickly moving things around, not realizing that I can squish those down into one stack and one inventory slot to free up some space. And so having a handy button to do that would be great. A lot of other games have it. I don't know why Minecraft doesn't have it yet, but that would be, I think, one of my top things for an inventory similar in function to Stardew Valley, because I did find Stardew Valley, as my experience was new to that game, it was really helpful to reorganize the inventory because it allowed me to find the things that I was looking for faster, because like I wasn't used to them. I didn't know the icon. I didn't know the name. I wasn't sure what to look for all the time. And also because Stardew Valley starts you off with a smaller inventory and then it grows over time, I found that that organize button became essential as a new player that had quickly expanded the inventory, expanded the number of things I was carrying, especially when I get into mining, and then just couldn't find head nor tails of what I was doing. So I think that the organized inventory would be tops of my list. What are your thoughts on JJ's email?
See, the problem I have with inventory organization like this is that player habits have been formed without it. And we've had, as we keep saying, 15, 16 years of people playing Minecraft a specific way. If you start to bring in organizational things that don't work for those players, then there's going to be friction. And Stardew Valley started out with that organized button. So players were able to get used to what order the game put stuff in. I did actually look up the Stardew Valley wiki just to see if that had ever been different, but it was there from the get-go. A later update prevented the button from reorganizing your tools. So we were talking about hotbar management. I think that was probably a pain point for players, that like it put the sword on the wrong side when, you know, you need that accessible if you're going to, you know, fight stuff off in a dungeon. You don't want to be slipping about where that is. But I think it's a good idea in principle, but in practice, most of the inventory organization mods I've played with go to great lengths to maintain player control. usually with some sort of UI which allows you to set like zones where different items will be sorted, maybe allows you to favorite stuff so it doesn't move when you hit organize, or the templates that sort of show the sort button what to put where, categories it will prioritize, whether it's alphabetical or whether it's sorted by block type or item type, and sort of separating those out, crafting ingredients versus whatever else, foliage versus blocks. And the result is often a UI which feels like a departure from the way Minecraft handles UI. Like, it loses some of the tactile feeling in favor of creating basically a series of nesting rules for how to do stuff. And that gets a little bit clunky, I find, for what Minecraft's approach to UI is, the sort of more minimalist approach to it, and that hands-on tactile feel that it has. I think it would mean quality of life in the long term, but it would feel like a chore in the short term to implement any of the UI solutions that I've seen from modded Minecraft. I totally agree, though, that having more ways to organize inventory eliminates a pain point for players, because a lot of the time things get very jumbled. Even just building my floating island base on Misadventures this week, my inventory was a giant mess the entire time, and I wanted to keep all the blocks on me because I couldn't go back and forth to the shulkers where I'd stored some of the supplies without risking falling out of the sky and then having to climb back up my scaffolding after I'd, gone and reclaimed my stuff from a gravestone. So, fortunately, that only happened once or twice, and the second time I water bucket clutched like a professional. But the other aspect of that was, I have to keep all these blocks on me at all times, and so I'm constantly shifting stuff in and out of my hotbar, pick blocking from my environment, doing everything I can not to look at my inventory, because when I did, my eyes would just kind of screw up. I'd just feel like, it's a giant mess. I don't have bundles on that server yet either, because we haven't implemented the old version of bundles, and the new version of bundles are still a couple of percentage, like a couple of decimal point updates off where we're at in terms of the mods being up to date. So yeah, it's tricky. I think they've done a decent job of introducing solutions that players can learn to add into their workflow instead of implementing things that are meant to be a fix but won't work for everybody. So there are a couple of things that could really work well. I think a condensed stacks button would be great if you've got only like a little bit of time to glance at your inventory, but you've got like 3 stacks of oak planks in different places, all with different amounts, and you could easily just consolidate those. Like, just double clicking on them would do it, but you're also not sure if you would do that, and you don't want to double click on every item in your inventory to make sure you don't have some of it stacked somewhere else, because that's just laborious and time consuming, right? So yeah, I do think there's room for some inventory organization to come into Minecraft. It's just how they introduce it has to feel like it's helpful to players and not an insult to people who've already spent a lot of time trying to organize their inventory to begin with.
Yeah, and I think the important thing there is, with a little bit of polite pushback, if they did, include a sort inventory button and you don't like the way that it works, don't push the button.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing to say to a video game player, because ultimately all of us are just like, but I want to push the button. Let me push the button. But if it doesn't do what you want, then that's a thing too. But to respond to the rest of JJ's email, I do have issue with expanding the inventory with the Wandering Trader or boss fights. I don't really think that's a decent solution. I think it alienates too many players. A lot of folks don't care for the Wandering Trader as it is, and or it may have the game feature turned off. We don't have them on the Citadel because we all find them kind of annoying, and we have either data pack solutions or we'd rather just go about finding things the old-fashioned way. We're also not early game, so like the Wandering Trader is way more useful in like a Skyblock or early game. I'll probably leave it on when I play Bedrock, this week, but we don't have them on the Citadel. And also I would find the RNG of that being very frustrating, and ultimately might be the only way that I want to interact with the Wandering Trader. And if it doesn't have a way for me to expand the inventory slot, I expect the Wandering Trader to have a very short vacation. So that's probably not what Mojang had intended with the Wandering Trader and how they want players to interact with it. So I can see that being a bit of a pain point. And also limiting personal inventory expansion to boss fights excludes a bunch of players that either don't want to or can't fight the bosses. Maybe they're playing with peaceful mode. They're just a personal player preference in survival. They just don't like that experience. Or it could be an accessibility issue. Maybe they don't have, like the fine motor control to deal with the Wither or to deal with the Ender Dragon, that kind of stuff. And so I think that just alienates a feature from people that just either don't want to or can't engage in that content. So I think that expanding the inventory, while a good idea, it has to be kind of like a universal. Like it either has to be it's just happened in the game. It's now, the last few years it's been 3 lines and now it's 4, or they've come up with another way to do it. One thing that we've mentioned in recent weeks, which I think is what prompted this email, I think that one simple way to help increase inventory capacity would be to just take some of the things that don't stack to 64 and get them to stack to 64. Some like eggs and other food items, like things like that. If it's not going to influence PvP or game play balance too much, some things like ender pearls, like I don't see a reason why they can't stack higher. Now, that could also be because I'm end game, and it might be more of an early game decision for Mojang, but I think that might be one way to increase the inventory capacity without increasing the slots.
Yeah, I think that's also a pretty reasonable idea. I also want to push back a little bit here on the notion that we don't already have inventory upgrades gated behind certain stuff, because we do. Your first inventory expansion is you get an ender chest, and that's gated by the Nether. You need to have an Eye of Ender in order to craft one, and so you go and kill a blaze and get some blaze powder and do that. Right. And your next inventory expansion is after the Ender Dragon, or you can skip the Ender Dragon if you want to, but you have to go to the end to get Shulker Boxes, at which point every slot of your inventory becomes a 27 slot inventory, albeit one you have to place down in the world. And I think that's the mental hurdle people have to make, is that the inventory isn't immediately accessible from the inventory GUI. Like, you have to start placing blocks in order to access all of it. You can't pick block out of Shulker Boxes and things like that. That can be resolved in a number of ways, of course, but I do think it's notable that we don't think of those as inventory expansions, even though they are massive inventory expansions, and almost multiplicative, because once you have an ender chest full of Shulker Boxes, then the sky's the limit, right? So yeah, I do think we overlook some aspects like that, because they are still gated in a certain sense by gameplay progression, and if you're playing on peaceful, you don't have access to either because you don't have blazes, so you'd have to find some way of data packing in access to Shulker Boxes or Eyes of Ender, or just the Ender Chest in general. That's why I think bundles are actually a really great addition, because they are so simple to get hold of. Even if you don't have spiders in your world because you're playing on peaceful, you can still get string from a couple of different places. Bundles are available as chest loot in villages now. I don't think Leatherworkers trade them yet. But yeah, you can get hold of them. They're very easy to craft, and that's your best tool for inventory organization, if not strictly speaking storage, outside of stuff like the Ender Chest. And it can even help you tidy up the Ender Chest and Shulker Boxes if you use them in tandem. So yeah, I think there are more options than people think of, and I still disagree with the general notion that expanding the inventory by a row does anything for Minecraft gameplay, because ultimately it just means more space to get cluttered with items the way your existing 27 slot inventory gets cluttered with items. It's going to be a band-aid for the larger problem. But yeah, I think either way, it's good that we're still having these conversations, because somewhere in there is the kernel of an idea that I think Mojang can take and turn into something that's going to benefit players long term. It just remains to be seen what solution they go with.
It's funny that you mentioned the bundles, because I've recently used them for another reason on the Citadel. But I was thinking as you were speaking, can you put 64 Ender Pearls in a bundle? Or does it treat them? No,
it treats them as an inventory stack. So 16 is the max, yeah.
Okay, cool. That's what I thought. But speaking of Shulker Boxes, Daniel M. has written in with a Shulker Box Organization email. Hi, Johnny and Joel. I was recently dyeing some leather armor, and I was wondering why we can't dye Shulker Boxes in a similar way with all of the different color combinations. I know that some color combinations are quite similar, but they could be distinct enough that when placed side by side, you could tell the difference. I feel like this will be a great quality of life update for people that use large Shulker Box stashes for projects. I, for one, would love to finally be able to tell the difference between my grass and moss shulkers. I'm excited to hear your thoughts on the idea and any addition to Shulker Box updates that you would like to see. Daniel. I've mentioned this recently on the show. I use Shulker Box Labels, which is a mod that I've got from modrinth.com. And I'd love to see something similar done like that in vanilla game to help with this kind of situation. One thing that immediately sprung to mind because of the way that armor is dyed, it leaves some bits of the brown leather, usually like around the soles of boots and around different areas. I think around the face and the helmet is also left kind of brown. What about Shulker Box trim? Like we have armor trim in the game. So we could use something similar to armor trim using similar materials like iron, gold, lapis, redstone. Again, it's not going to be super early game because, well, one, you'd have to get shulker boxes, but you'd also have to have these materials on hand. So it wouldn't be cheap. And even without unique patterns like armor trim, just having a few different trim colors, like outlines around the edges of a shulker box, or take the shulker box texture pattern and sort of like tweak it so that it looks like it's got, a gold or a lapis or a redstone inlay, that would increase the number of shulker colors by, exponentially by the number of colors of trim. And you would go from having 16 different shulkers to having, 64 or more, depending. And I think that would be a really cool way to do it, because while you can name a shulker box in an anvil, you can't see that in the world. And I really find the quickest and easiest way to organize all of my stuff is usually visually, right? It's usually like color coding, remembering that all my brown shulker boxes are usually wood shulker boxes. The problem, of course, is that if you got multiple shulker boxes that are brown, then you have to kind of then figure out a way to differentiate them. I was playing the memory game for the longest time. It was oak, spruce, dark oak, and then it would go on to other different wood types from there, often in different colors. But I would always place them down in that order, because if I didn't, I would be clicking on the wrong one constantly. Mm-hmm. And one of the ideas I had was also like a label on a shulker box that would be visible, like the words on the shulker box. In the same way that you would label it in an anvil, maybe some of that would be visible on the shulker box itself. But I've played with mods like that before, where the text would hover when you put your mouse over it, or you would see something, and it's just not as easy. It's still, even if it's all text and different text, it's still hard to read the difference quick enough in the way that you want to build as a player. And I find that visually, the way that I've done it with the shulker box labels mod really helps, because it allows you to put like a object, whether it's a block or an item, on the top of the shulker box. And I think that maybe shulker box trim would be the closest way to solve that in vanilla. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some wisdom to the idea of decorating shulker boxes. I think it's interesting comparing it to leather armor. I think the two are fairly distinct for a couple of reasons. I think because leather armor is more like an entity, like it's equipment, rather than being a block. And that's maybe what allows for colors to be more dynamic, because there are 16 million possible armor colors, because it's like hexadecimal color codes, right? So there's like a lot, and it all just represents the different values of red and green and everything. But like if shulkers could be dyed any color, you've got a bunch of placeable blocks that can be dyed any color, and I think that's an interesting proposition, and one that Mojang probably wants to steer away from. It might incentivize players to build with them, because they could fill a gap in basically any color gradient, albeit not a texture gradient. But then obviously they're expensive, so maybe that puts pressure on Mojang to take a similar approach to other dyed blocks like wool, concrete, terracotta. Obviously, this is a slippery slope argument, and maybe not the way Mojang thinks, but I think it would make it harder for the art team, ultimately, to make decisions about what the game needs next in terms of color and texture for new additions, because if players have access to an infinite range of color, how do you know that a certain type of block is missing at that stage? I think that's maybe why we don't end up with things like dyed wood planks or a similar approach to paint in the game, is that because then it makes it much harder for them to figure out a direction for the art style of Minecraft from that point forward. On a technical level, I think dyeing shulker boxes like that wouldn't be possible, because right now they are blocks and they have block data associated with them. Like each of the different shulker boxes is its own block code, so that's probably part of it, and along with that, they have to make sure that the game remembers what's stored inside of them. They are a much more complex thing than just a piece of armor that's always got the same stats when a player equips it. 16 colors makes them simpler. But I do think a more visual method of labeling them when they're placed on the ground would be really helpful. Like, I think one of the biggest points of friction with shulkers, similarly to how we had the discussion just now about, placing shulkers in the world and them not really being an inventory expansion, or not something we think of as an inventory expansion. They need to be placed for access to their contents, but you lose the advantages inherent to keeping them in your inventory, which are that they have a visible name and they have visible contents. You can at least see a summary of what's in the first few slots of each shulker. So some way of seeing that, but when they're placed on the ground as a compromise could be an interesting one. But failing that, I think a method of labeling them or identifying two similar shulker boxes, considering how frequently players use tons and tons of shulker boxes to move stuff around, is probably a good idea in the long run.
So one of the mods that I have in addition to the Shulker Box labels is Shulker Box Tooltip, which has been around for a while. And really all it does is in the inventory, you select a key. I use Shift. And when you mouse over the Shulker Box, you can press Shift and it'll show you a full 3-line inventory about what's in that shulker. You can't choose anything. You can't pull anything from it. It would be like if you could look inside of a bundle entirely instead of the top two stacks. And I really find that handy, especially in the Ender chest where I've got a full 27 or 26 shulker boxes. And before I was using the labels mod where I could put like different items like a redstone dust on my redstone box. If I had 2 red shulkers in my inventory, I could quickly just hit Shift and see, oh, that's the redstone box, and oh, that's my like utility box that has like my bed and my torches and my coal and like other that stuff in it. And I found that very helpful in terms of quickly discerning what was in the box without kind of getting around the functionality of shulker boxes being needed to place in the world before you can access them. So it doesn't kind of like cheat that. It just kind of like gives you a peek so that you can quickly discern what's inside of them.
Yeah, really, really helpful stuff. Like, I think the modding community has come through for little kind of pain points like that help people use them. But yeah, maybe there's a chance for them to expand a little bit in vanilla in future. Either way, we're going to move on to our final email. This one comes in from Frozen Chickens, and the subject is content without the latest content, or perhaps content without the latest content. It's difficult to read that in text, to be honest, but I think that's what they mean, because they say, "Hi, Pix and Joel. In episode 353, Tricky Trials 1 Year On, Joel discussed how he has yet to tackle a trial chamber, which I relate to heavily. I have a 5-year world that is still on 1.20.4, because I have several long-term projects and don't care to bother with updating mods and the like. I certainly would love to have all the new game features, but I find myself content with the grind of my projects. Now that updates have become smaller, more frequent game drops, do you think it's harder for players to stay grounded in long-term projects? Do you think that skipping updates for a while might actually support a healthier creative headspace? Thank you for the best podcast to listen to while grinding away. Frozen Chickens just kept on playing."
Another positive death message. Like just
yeah. It's almost like they're going back to writing normal email sign-offs.
I could see how more frequent updates would entice and or encourage players to either start new projects or start a new game, every time a drop comes out. Or even, in my case, push off ideas that they've been waiting to do for features that they know are coming that they don't have to wait very long for. For example, I did this for the landscaping around West Hill because I wanted to wait until 1.21.5 was accessible for me with the mods on the Citadel, because I wanted access to all the new foliage, like the dry grass, the bushes, and the firefly bushes. And if I had to wait 6 months or more for that, I would have just finished with what I had. I've been doing perfectly fine without those things until recently. But once I knew they were coming with this new update schedule in the next couple of months, I was like, you know what? I will just find other things to do. And I'll do the landscaping when I have some cool new stuff to play with, because I know that I'll be more excited about it when that happens. So I can see kind of like the back and forth on that. We've mentioned on the show where drops are more frequent, and that is a good thing, that they do sometimes feel less poignant depending on the content and the subjectivity of the players playing with them. Like, if you are not as interested in something like, for me, Chase the Skies, unless Vibrant Visuals is in Java, like that's really going to be my push to update. I don't have a big push right now for the Happy Gast personally. It's not like I think that they're bad. I just, in where I am in the game and what my projects are doing right now, they're just not going to really influence what I'm doing. So it's not really worth all the hubbub of updating right now compared to someone like you that does a tutorial series. You're just like, yeah, like I want this stuff right away. And so I think that things like under the hood changes, vibrant visuals, and stuff that affect rendering and performance might push me. But other than that, I don't see myself going too far into it. In a way, it may actually be easier for players to stick to long-term projects if they can look ahead and not feel the need to update immediately. And so I think that in a way, it is a healthier headspace, but not something that necessarily is a push from Mojang. I think it's just naturally how things might go depending on how players approach the game. Ultimately, I think the idea of a healthy creative headspace, it's just a good thing to maintain regardless of gameplay drops. Whether it's the content, whether it's the release frequency. I think that you as a player can foster a healthier mindset by just getting ideas from outside of Minecraft, film, television, books, architecture, something that you do all the time with architecture, nature, playing other games. I think that also taking breaks, whether you don't have to play a different game. Like there's lots of survival games and lots of building games out there, but you can also just not play Minecraft and just kind of let that part of your mind rest for a while and come back refreshed. I always bring it back to like when I was doing a lot of work as an artist, getting frustrated with a design or something, just coming back to it the next day, going to the gym, just go do something else, give your brain a chance to recharge and pull in other things. I know that one of the artists I follow online, Jake Parker, has always said, like, if you're drawing all the time, you're not replenishing your imagination by consuming other stuff. Mm-hmm. So if you are supposed to be generating ideas, you can't just generate on no fuel. Like the mind is an engine and it needs to be fueled regularly. And I think that in a creative game like Minecraft, people often compare like creative burnout or a healthy creative headspace to this constant march forward. And in a way, like it's good game design that Minecraft just makes you want to play all the time, but it's also tapping your creativity constantly when you're playing. And so you need to kind of step back and have other things going on, I think, to work on that. And I'm on the fence. Like I feel like it's going to be a very personal response as to whether more frequent updates are going to encourage the I just have to keep going in the game, or it's going to encourage the I'm going to step back and not necessarily update right away because I don't need to. And I think it's going to be a very personal thing. How do you feel about it?
I absolutely agree it's a personal thing. I think if I was working on a major project, like if I had a city project that I was really passionate about and really wanted to just be on the grind for, I could still update the game in the background because there's nothing that is inherently distracting about those new features other than your own curiosity for them. So, like, I think really the mods are the main barrier to updating, or if you're on a server, there is more action needs to be taken both to make sure that other players are ready for the update and to make sure that the server is updated and that all of the files are still compatible and everything. But if you're opening a solo world, then the only thing you need to do is change the version in the launcher or just leave the launcher on the latest version and open the world in the new update. Your project is still going to be there and is still going to be the same because it's unusual for Mojang to change features that significantly after they're introduced. So you can absolutely continue projects while upgrading through the new game drops. You just don't go and look for the happy Gast and it just continues normally, right? Now, there are obviously some exceptions to that, and I think this is probably the most impactful argument for heavily technical players. You'll find that folks who exploit mechanics that are likely to be patched out will find that from update to update, their gameplay experience is very different, and not because of new features necessarily, just because of bug fixes that change things or, behavior changes that wouldn't impact the majority of players, but some people were relying on. I think the most notable widespread example of this as far as a survival player's mentality goes is the 1.21 nerf to raid farms, the fact that Bad Omen can't be obtained like over and over again except in bottled form, and so raid farms can't be triggered constantly and it doesn't produce the same amount of stuff. And Mojang did adjust back in favor of redstone production from witch farms, but it meant that whole like subsection of the community that relied on those farms for a lot of different resources had to recalibrate a little bit of how they worked in the change from 1.20 to 1.21. That's a pretty major example, but then the rest of those things are all going to be like little, like the portal fix thing that I talked about earlier, or, you know, there's some things where entities interact with nether portals in different ways that means that stuff, you know, chunk loaders work differently and things like that. Even ender pearl chunk loading being a new thing, you might see people taking a moment to adjust to that and seeing what they can do with it, but then getting right back on with whatever they were doing. I think if you're a builder especially, there aren't going to be many changes that mean you can't keep going on the thing that you're building or the hole that you're digging or any of that stuff. So mods are really the main barrier to update, which is why I rarely use them for any of my solo projects. If I'm on a modded server and things need to update, then yeah, I'm stuck on 1.20.1 on Misadventures, right? Or 1.21.1. I forget which version it is, but like we're on tricky trials, but we don't have access to things like bundles and some of the sort of later features of that range of updates. And there's some stuff that I would really like, but, you know, the mods have to stay where they are for the sake of, you know, balance and some of the code changes that got made. But I think on a solo world like Survival Guide, even if I'm not going out and interacting with the Happy Gast right away, I'm still happy to update because it doesn't really make all that much difference. I don't find the other features inherently a distraction. If I want to incorporate them in what I'm doing, great. I remember back in a few versions ago now when they added hanging signs to West Hill. You wanted to update so that, you know, you could add them, but the update was not necessarily like something you wanted right then and there. You could wait and you could still update, but then you went out and made a bunch of those immediately because they were all available to you with materials that you had to hand and you could craft. So like I feel like that's an example of when those things can make their way into your gameplay, but the existence of hanging signs was just a reason to keep going with the ongoing project that you already had, right? It didn't make you want to go and build a hanging sign utopia somewhere else.
No, and I think it is also a part of, like, I don't want to call it self-control, but there's a certain level of, well, now they've introduced like tough bricks and all the different tough stairs and slabs to the game. Things that I really could have used 2 years ago when I was building like the foundations. But like, I'm not going back and changing stuff from that many years ago, because I look at the 4 years I've been building West Hill as a bit of a time capsule. Like, you can tell where certain updates happen. You can see where the copper roofs came in because copper became a thing with, you know, with tricky trials and all that kind of stuff. Like it was, or the additional copper blocks became a thing for what I was doing. And I think that kind of restraint, I guess, is part of like that personal aspect I was thinking of. I wasn't actually thinking about emergent gameplay and technical gameplay. I'm glad you brought that up, because like in the same way that Mojang might patch a bug or change a behavior to accommodate a new feature that then retroactively makes a farm harder to use or not as efficient. Say like the changes that they made to aggro on zombified piglins recently.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that broke the way that our current donut farm works in the Citadel. It still functions, but you have to kind of be there and click on stuff. It's not as AFK as it used to be. And we could make some adjustments to it. The actual gathering of the zombified piglin still works just fine. It's just it's the constant way to aggro them and stuff that's different. And we could make some adjustments. And because I think more often than not, the emergent gameplay from updates is not necessarily, oh, this is broken and now I have to go fix it. It's often things like, we've added the crafter, or we've added a different way for, you know, XP to be farmed. There's a new potion that allows XP farms with silverfish and armadillos.
Yeah, the infestation potion you can do, right, with armadillos or allays, anything that doesn't take damage or can heal through the damage when it's producing silverfish. Yeah,
because I was looking recently because of that change to the zombified piglin farm about a new XP farm, and I found all these very simple overworld farms that, I mean, technical but not big. Like they're inside of a chunk. It's a very small footprint to get some XP going. And I thought, like, whoa, that's really interesting. I never thought about that. So there's a lot of people that are on that edge of emergent gameplay that do get a lot out of new updates. And so I don't know, it's one of those things where I I feel like when you have that kind of stuff happening more often, when all the dust settles, I think it's good for the game and I think it's good for players. Like I don't see the frequency as a negative. And I don't think that Frozen Chickens was implying that, but just in case anybody might be pulling that out of the email, like I don't think that there's a negative there when all things are said and done.
Yeah, like I think honestly, if you're likely to be distracted by new features, that's something that each individual handles on their own personal level, right? Like I think I see no reason to assume that all players' attention span is going to benefit from holding back on new features. And again, I don't think that's necessarily what they are saying, but I think personally, I find myself in a more creative headspace when there are new features because the game around me is moving forward. The world is evolving. I feel like I have to evolve with it. And so a lot of these things, especially since my creativity lends itself better to smaller projects rather than huge long-term builds because of the nature of the content that I produce for YouTube, amongst other things, I think it's nice to have a rolling, like, updating world because that means it gives you more stuff to react to, and I think that feels like creativity for me is about a growing and changing thing instead of feeling like things get stagnant. I feel like I lose creativity when stuff like that happens. So yeah, I think it's going to vary wildly depending on your personal philosophy there.
Yeah, and I think too that it's a good problem to have. Like you mentioned trial chambers again, and for me, like, I've been thinking about what can I do in between my Westel project and my next thing. And there's so many things that I've yet to do in Minecraft with as frequent as it has been updating. I forget until someone's like, I also have not done a trial chamber. And I go, oh yeah, I have said on the show that I've meant to go experience a trial chamber and then mine it out for the copper. Like I have such a list of things that I haven't yet tried in the game that I forget that I've not done them, and so that's a good problem to have as a video game player playing a game that updates for free what looks like 4 times a year now, right?
Yeah, a lot of projects for a rainy day, I think, ultimately, and that's a very, very good thing. I think that's where we'll leave this episode of The Spawn Chunks, but thank you so much for all of the emails. Once again, keep them coming in. If you've got some opinions you want to share about Vibrant Visuals or the Happy Gast especially, we would love to get a hold of some of those for next week's show. In the meantime, you can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and we are proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community, where pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it every Monday, so you get the show before anybody else does. You also get a longer version of the show called The Render Distance, and you get to participate in our monthly hangouts, which include things like sharing what you've been up to in Minecraft that month, and a quarterly hangout where we go over the behind-the-scenes stuff about the podcast. We currently have 283 patrons, so we'd love to see that number creep up towards 300 again. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. Thank you for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. Just tell a friend about the Spawn Chunks and where they can go to listen to it. We are at the Spawn Chunks on social media. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Once again, let us know what you think of Chase the Skies and Vibrant Visuals. We'd love to hear from you. New episodes are published on Mondays on all of your favorite podcasting platforms, and the video version is on YouTube as well as on Spotify. The RSS feed is linked on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to The Render Distance, the extended version of the program.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs. Take a look out there for the Minecraft Survival Guide returning later this week, as well as the finale of Craft Mine, and hopefully an episode of Misadventures once I've done a little bit more work on that project. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, so you can catch me there doing behind-the-scenes stuff for my YouTube series. That's at twitch.tv/Pixelriffs. I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick search on YouTube. And aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Take a listen to the Citadel Cafe. It's my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. We have a recent episode out about the Thunderbolts from Marvel, and right now Steven is catching up on Andor, so we're going to talk about that a little bit, and we're both going to watch Predator Killer of Killers on Disney+. That's what's coming up on the next episode. I think we're recording later in June. I'm Joel Duggan on social media, very easy to find, and of course Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I am currently trying to finish up West Hill, but I will be popping back into Satisfactory soon as well, because 1.1 just gave a full release on that game.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite. Happy Gast Day to you.